I didn't swerve fast enough. The second set of headlights was already inside my lane, rigid and dead on, as if the driver had locked their elbows. The impact didn't come. That's the part I never explain right. There was the inevitability, the wind up, the certainty of metal crushing into metal, and then nothing. My car sped through their beams like I'd outrun my own reflection. My stomach was fist. I checked my rear view and saw those lights still pointed straight at me, but farther away now, as if distance had inverted. I thought I'd hallucinated. But the fresh spiderweb crack in my windshield said I hadn't imagined everything. I drove that road once a week for work. A feeder highway between small towns, long cornfields on both sides that made night feel like a tunnel. I knew every gas station and ranch gate like you know the moles on your own arm. This time, I left later than usual because my boss needed a last-minute proof. I told myself that meant fewer cars, quicker drive, good music. By the time I reached the long, straight stretch past the irrigation canal, it was just me, a farmer's pickup 2 miles back, and the kind of darkness that makes you aware of your breathing. Halfway through the straightaway, my GPS glitched. The blue arrow froze, jittered back 3 inches, then sped ahead as if trying to catch up. I frowned and tapped my phone. Service flickered from 2 bars to none, then back. I wasn't nervous, just irritated, until my high beam swept over the mile marker. It had no numbers, just the dull reflective green slab with nothing printed. No stencil outline, no scrape marks like it had never been inked. I laughed out loud. Okay, prank sign. Never seen one. Behind me, the farmer's pickup was closer than it should have been. I checked the speedometer. 62. He was doing 80. I adjusted my mirror and realized my mistake. The truck wasn't growing. The darkness was coming forward, the corn shadows crawling into my taillights. My radio cut to static, not the hissy kind, but a gritty, grinding static like something catching in a bad throat. That's when I saw the first set of headlights, not the pickup ahead. Off to my left where the service road runs parallel. They matched my speed. Then, very smoothly, they angled toward the highway at the next junction. I prepared to tap the brakes. The oncoming car didn't adjust. It came down the on-ramp, signal off, and just settled into the opposing lane, so we were facing each other perfectly. I waited for the little correction all drivers make. None. The nose of their car never dipped. No change in engine pitch. Just those 2 white circles holding a straight, steady line. My hands got damp. I flashed my brights twice. No response. I leaned on the horn, a loud animal sound in the night. If I'd turned around there, if I'd taken the one safe option of pulling onto the shoulder and waiting, I wouldn't be telling this. They were half a mile away when my engine gave a single cough, like it swallowed spit wrong. My dash lights dimmed. I took my foot off the gas. The car slowed a hair, then held 62 as if an invisible foot kept it there. My horn died mid-wail. Silence smothered the interior. Only the tires and the breathing. Mine and something else. It took me a second to register the second sound wasn't in the car. It was under the car, a low drawn-out shah, like fabric dragging on asphalt. In those final seconds, I aimed for the shoulder. The steering wheel resisted, heavy and disinterested. My palms slid. Death doesn't feel like drama when it's aimed at you. It feels like logistics, angle, speed, how many feet, what to do with your hands. Their lights filled my windshield. The crack appeared like frost, blossoming from the right side, and then the world snapped back into normal proportions. My engine screamed, my horn blared, my steering loosened all at once. The other car's headlights were behind me, full in my rear view. I yelled a raw, cracked sound, and jerked back into my lane. The pickup wasn't there. I pulled onto the shoulder and sat so still that my seatbelt tightened against me with the little delayed grab. My radio returned with a burst of an ad in Spanish. I said, okay, to test my voice. It worked. The air didn't. The night pressed against the windows like a warm palm. It took me a full minute to look behind. The road was empty. No headlights, no taillights, only the red blink of a tower miles away. The mile marker beside me was another blank one. I got out to touch it, to prove it was real, some teenager's trick, a weird county defect. The reflective film was smooth and new. My fingers left a damp crescent. Maybe the numbers peeled away. Maybe the paint shop messed up. I looked down at the asphalt. There was a small pile of shredded, pale fabric caught near my rear tire. It looked like the hem of a dress that had been dragged along the ground. I kicked at it before my brain finished thinking. It disintegrated under my shoe, then vanished into the wind like pollen. My phone had no service. The GPS arrow floated in a gray void. I'm not a person who scares easy. But a certain kind of wrong, quiet wrong, system wrong, makes your body try to fold into your bones. I got back in and locked the doors. For what, I don't know. To keep the corn out. I drove at 40 with my hazards on until I reached a lit intersection. There was a diner. There are always diners where you need them, like fairy tale inns. I pulled in hard and sat with my hands at 10 and 2 while my hazard clicker ticked me into this world again. A waitress came out to check if I was okay. Her eyes went to my windshield. "Dear," she asked, not seeing any blood, just the impact flour. "Maybe," I said. I almost hit a car. But then it was behind me. She looked past me to the road, then back at the cracked glass. "You should call that in." I tried. The call didn't go through. The waitress tilted her head. "Landline inside," she said. "You look pale." Coffee. In the diner, the air smelled like hot sugar and fryer oil. A couple of truckers stared without meaning to. I dialed the highway patrol on a yellowed handset. The line rang and clicked to a recorded prompt. While I waited, I glanced at the wall. There were a few Polaroids pinned under plastic regulars, a Halloween costume. One photo showed a smashed sedan at a three-way junction at night, hazard lights blinking in a long exposure smear. The caption in marker, "Rest Stop Angel 2011. The waitress noticed me looking. "That one," she said, tapping it, "was bad. Drunk teens in a minivan." We put up the crosses. She paused, then added, like it was part of the weather, "Sometimes folks say they see lights drift." We had a guy leave his car in the road once, screaming. He said the car behind him was in front of him. He never drove at night again. "Lights drift?" I asked. She shrugged. "It's the fog. Or the land. It's flat. You know how everything looks closer out there." I was dead clear, I said. My coffee arrived steaming, and I held it too tightly. A trooper finally answered, bored but efficient. I described the near miss. He asked me to read the nearest mile marker. I went outside and walked to the sign. My cheeks prickled before my eyes registered what I already knew. Blank. Just the green. I gave him the nearest intersection instead. He told me he'd note it and send a car to check for disabled vehicles. Before we hung up, he said, "There's been construction. If numbers are missing, it's probably the county." I barely slept that night in the motel. Every time headlights rolled past, I flinched. At 3 in the morning, I got up, stood at the window, and watched my reflection in the black glass. I couldn't tell if the white specks outside were distant cars or my own eyes catching light. 2 days later, I took a daytime drive to prove to myself it was just a weird night. The sun made the fields gentle and harmless. The mile marker was blank in daylight too. I pulled over again. Day made me arrogant. I crouched and ran my nail along the edge of the reflective sheet. It lifted. The vinyl peeled back, exposing not green metal underneath but another reflective layer, a faint paint ghost of the number 13. My scalp tightened. I decided then that I would stop using that road. But a month later, I forgot that promise. Old habits win. It was late again. Different sky, same smell. Halfway along, I saw the lights of a patrol car on the shoulder. I slowed, relief flowering. A trooper stood with a flashlight, waving traffic to merge left. Beyond him, a cluster of emergency vehicles flickered. A car had gone off the road at the very same junction. I passed slow and made myself look. The sedan was crushed into an upside-down J at the ditch, nose in the dirt, trunk up, hazard lights pulsing. A tarp covered the front half. In the grass near the tail end, some torn fabric twisted in the breeze. White, fine, hemmed. The trooper's face was impassive, professional. The other trooper directed me past the blank mile marker. 2 hours later, home showered. Trying to scrape the smell of coolant from my memory, I scrolled local news. The headline was "Quiet, One Dead in Late-Night Collision Near County 7. The photo was that same angle from the diner Polaroid, decades later. Comments: blood superstition. I don't usually read comment sections. That night I did, because I was looking for someone to tether me to reasonable explanations. Third comment down, a woman wrote, "My sister died there in 2011. Drunk driver hit her at the merge. Sometimes I swear I still see her signal in my mirror." I looked at her profile picture. She wore a white dress in the only photo. I didn't sleep that night either. When I finally dozed toward dawn, my phone pinged. A message from an unknown number: "You were smart to pull over." It was a 7-digit number, not 10. I blocked it with shaky hands. A week later, I drove at noon, took a different route, avoided the junction. At a stoplight, a car rolled up next to me. The passenger window was down. A woman in her 50s leaned slightly toward the gap. Hair silver, eyes red-rimmed in the way people's eyes look when they've cried too much in years past. Not tonight. "Hey," she called. I turned. "You drive the blue Civic?" she asked. My stomach pinched. She smiled in a sympathetic way strangers sometimes do when they think you're someone else. "You look like my niece," she said. "She hates that stretch out there." The light changed. She drove away. I moved 2 months later, for unrelated reasons. But the move felt like a decision I'd been inching toward, since the crack appeared in my windshield without an impact. I still drive at night, just not in places that flatten the world into beam and corn. People ask why I keep a rosary in my glove compartment. I'm not Catholic. It was hanging from the mirror in the rental I used while my car was in the shop. The rental smelled faintly of hot sugar and fryer oil. The rosary felt stupid at first, and then like something to hold when I pass new mile markers and make sure they have numbers. I've told this to 3 people in person. All of them nodded in that way where they think you're fragile for a minute. So, I stopped telling it mostly. Except I will tell you the one other detail I never included because it makes me sound unhinged. When the trooper asked me, on the phone, to read the nearest mile marker, and I walked out to the blank sign, something moved in the corn. A breath, a drag. Slow fabric pulled across dirt. I didn't look at it because I felt like if I looked, my car would turn its headlights on and start toward me on its own. That's the trick of the road, I think. Not that it kills you with speed, that it rearranges distance until you're inside the wrong place with no number. I did replace my windshield. The crack is gone. On clear nights, sometimes I glance over at the passenger seat and see a faint white fiber caught on the seatbelt. I pick it off and it dissolves between my fingers like dust. I tell myself it's nothing. I tell myself a lot of things. I don't drive past blank signs, because if I do, I don't think I'll be the one telling the story. Twist months later, a coworker casually mentions a mile marker with no number on a totally different road 2 counties over. County's cheap. He jokes. I laugh so I don't have to tell him I checked. The road doesn't have a mile 13. At 3:14 a.m., a man walked past my office door. His face didn't move. Not a blink, not a muscle twitch, nothing but the glide of his body like he'd been scrolled through the hallway. I know how that sounds. I know what dead looks like too, and he wasn't dead. He was something like paused. I was the night security supervisor for a municipal building that had been repurposed from an old bank. Think vault turned archives, terrazzo floors, the echo of money room. In the bones, we had 4 floors, 2 stairwells, and a courier elevator that had been out of service since the 80s. My shift ran 11 to 7. It was all cameras, key cards, and coffee. The place had history, and like any place with a history, it had stories. But I didn't indulge them. I didn't need to. Real life hands you enough reasons to worry without adding ghosts. That night, my rookie called in sick, so I covered rounds alone. The building smelled like paper and the ghost of ink. My office was on the 2nd floor near the main stairwell. I had a wall of 9 monitors, 2 for exterior, 2 for lobbies, 1 for vault corridor, 1 for each stairwell landing. At 3:14 on the digital clock, the corridor camera flickered, pixelated into a chessboard, and clicked back. That's when he passed. Not on the screen, through my doorway. The door was half open because it always stuck at 90 degrees. He went by on my right peripheral, like a person late for something boring. I turned quick enough to creak my chair and caught the end of a sleeve disappear around the corner toward stairwell B. My heart jumped into protocol. No one should be there. After hours access was managed, and tonight was clean. I stood, radioed a soft heads up to no one because no one else was on. The hallway was still, lights humming their low hum. The air felt colder by 1 degree, the way hospitals and morgues always sit at a different temperature from your skin. I walked to the corner, looked down the B corridor. Empty. I quickened. This is the part where people say they felt watched. I didn't. I felt late. At the B stairs, the door's push bar took effort. Something sticky had dried on it earlier. Cleaning solution residue, I'd told myself. The door swung open on its hinge with a shudder like a sigh. The stairwell was sterile concrete painted beige, a color that exists to be ignored. On the landing below, the light flickered twice in that random, electrical way. "Hello," I said, regretting the uselessness of the word, even as it left me. My footprint echoed itself back a half step later like a second person walking perfectly in sync 1 flight down. I descended. At the next landing the emergency map plaque was missing. Only the screw holes remained, 2 iron eyelets. That bothered me more than it should have. Nobody takes the safety map off a wall in a municipal building. As I put my hand on the rail to go down 1 more, I caught motion in the corner of my vision, a forearm moving away, mid-stride, a business shirt's cuff. I stepped faster, quiet as I could be in boots that never learned discretion. Level 1 landing. The light was steady here. The door to the 1st floor corridor was ajar. It shouldn't have been. That door had an automatic close. I eased it open and peered. The lobby beyond had that 3 a.m. emptiness that turns objects into silhouettes. The big mural of the town's founder took up one wall, his painted eyes doing what painted eyes do. I scanned left-right and saw a shadow cut the light by the records room. Not a shadow like Throne, a shadow like a person but smoother at the edges. It slid into the records room and the door eased shut without the latch clicking. I keyed in. The green light hesitated a beat then flicked. Inside shelves and shelves of boxes, the cardboard kind that looked patient. Rows labeled with year date. It smelled like foxed paper, like attic heat. I listened. People always say silence has texture in moments like these. It does. It's the texture of doubt. I moved down aisle 3. Halfway along I stopped. There was a gap. Between boxes marked 1998 and 1999, the back wall, concrete in every other aisle, wasn't there. Instead, an opening, 3 feet wide, black as a mouth going back farther than my flashlight wanted to travel. I should have stopped then. Called facilities. Called a human. Instead I pointed the beam. It hit stairs. Another stairwell, no paint. Bare concrete raw. The steps went down, not up. Our building had a sub-basement for the old vault. That wasn't new. The map in my head put the vault below the lobby but offset. This opening didn't line up with anything on the plan. I'd never seen this. In 8 years, I had never seen a gap in aisle 3. Sir, I said toward the seam in the dark, as if my hypothetical man would prefer respect. The silence ate my word. I stepped through and my skin brought me information my brain couldn't translate. The temperature was cooler by 3 degrees. The air was denser. The smell was not paper, not concrete, wet iron, like a coin you've held too long. I went down 5 steps, 10, counting because counting is what you do when the other things you usually do don't matter. At 15, I heard a sound that was not my boot on the concrete. It was the small scuff of leather against stair, one landing below. He was there, paused. The light from my flashlight fanned out and hit his shoulder. He was standing sideways. He wore a white dress shirt that had no wrinkles at the elbows. That stuck with me. People's elbows know their day. His didn't. As the light touched him, he turned his head. His face didn't change. No recognition, no blink, no narrowing of pupils. He wasn't expressionless, he was paused, as if I'd caught a single frame of a film that hadn't loaded the next second. "Sir, you can't be here," I said, and the normalness of my voice calmed the part of me dancing at the edges. He didn't respond. He pivoted and kept descending. I followed. It felt stupid and inevitable. 3 more landings, and then the stairs dead-ended into an old fire door with the paint oxidized into a rusty rose. It had a wired glass window, the kind with mesh that keeps the shards from becoming knives. Through the glass, I saw a corridor lit by a single bulb in a cage. He went through the door without opening it. I froze. I know your expectations now that I reached out and my hand passed through. That's not what happened. The door was solid under my palm. The handle was cold and gummy with time, but it turned with effort. The hinge complained. The corridor beyond smelled like time had gone still and rotted. Water had seeped somewhere and never left. There were deposit boxes along one wall, the old vault, maybe. But the configuration was wrong. The boxes weren't numbered. They had names. Hand-lettered in a fine black script. Each little card behind Fog Glass Marshall, A. Pritchard, E. And then, in the 5th row down, my last name. Not my father's or grandfather's. Mine. Not a common name. The card was recent, the ink not yet browned by years. I put my hand on the fog pane. The glass was cool. I know how paper feels under glass. I've pressed documents that matter. This felt like a window to something that didn't care about my confirmation. Behind the pane, I couldn't see a box, only darkness like the inside of a locked eye. My radio hissed abruptly, a burst of words that had already happened. Copy that, on level, and then static. I lifted it, relieved. Dispatch, come in, I said, as if there was a dispatch. There wasn't. But the habit was muscle deep. Down the corridor, the man stood by the last door, a heavy metal thing with a round handle like a ship's. He placed his palm to the steel and paused, exactly like a tape frame freezing. When his hand fell away, there was a print in frost. I could see the whorls. He turned. Something changed then. His face didn't move, but his attention found me. I know when a room looks at you. He didn't smile or frown. He lifted his right hand as if to wave, but stopped at the exact midpoint. Frozen again. Frame. I took a step back. "Who are you?" I asked. It sounded theatrical, but I didn't know how else to ask. He shook his head very slightly and tapped his chest once with 2 fingers. Not a name, a designation. Then he pointed not at me, not past me. He pointed at the box with my name. His fingers held there, then lowered. He scrolled toward the ship-handled door and slid through again. The metal was real for me. I put my ear to it. On the other side, a muffled sound like drawers opening and shutting, like someone inventorying their life. I didn't try to open it. I'm not brave or foolish enough to open closed things meant to stay closed. Instead, I did the rational thing. I turned around and left. That decision, leaving, felt small and radical. On the stairs, my flashlight flickered. I squeezed it. It went out. Darkness ate the angles. My hand found the rail and I counted up. 15 steps, landing, 15, landing. The air warmed and thinned. The smell shifted from iron to paper again. I stepped into aisle 3. The wall was whole, no gap. Boxes from 1998 to 1999 sat flush, cardboard complacent. I stood still a long time, waiting for my breath to agree we weren't imagining. The records room door latched firmly as I left. In the hallway, everything was as it always had been. The emergency map on the stairwell B landing was back. The screw holes weren't empty. I took my phone and snapped a picture of the wall anyway, like a child stealing proof. The photo shows a beige wall, 2 screws, a map. My office clock read 30:21. The rest of the shift did the normal night things which felt like mercy. At 70 hoded, I brought maintenance down to aisle 3. We pulled the boxes in that section because there's a draft. I lied. Behind them, concrete, solid. No seams, no cavity. The maintenance guy knocked it like you'd knock a melon. Sounds like a wall, he said, smirking. I laughed too big and said something about old buildings. He taped my laugh to me with his eyes like he might use it later if someone asked about me. I didn't sleep that day. I went to the county records site and typed my last name. It pulled a dozen entries, birth certificates, property liens, the mundane documents of existence. Then I searched the building. A digitized plan from the 1960s popped up. 2 stairwells, 1 elevator, vault under the lobby. No additional structures, no secret doors, no ship handles. 3 weeks later, we had a small fire on level 2, faulty microwave in the break room. We evacuated. I counted heads. 1 short, a woman from archives. I went in to get her because this is the one thing that training can't argue with. There is a person inside. The smoke was thin but thick enough to sting. The sprinklers had overeagerly drenched only the areas least on fire. The archives were fine. I found her near aisle 3, coughing. I put my hand on her back and led. As we passed the spot, the air cooled by 3 degrees. I felt it. She did too. She whispered. They opened it. In a voice afraid of itself. I didn't ask what she meant. We got outside. We counted again. Everyone was breathing. That night, a courier brought a stack of boxes up to my office, misdelivered. The top one had a typed label for an estate inventory. The decedent's last name was the same as the hand-lettered card I'd seen. I sliced it open to check for a contact. On top, an index card with a list wristwatch, 17 jewel, broken face, ledger personal, key ring with 3 keys. Under the card, a small cloth bag. I opened it. Inside, 3 keys on a ring. One was cut in a pattern that looked like teeth and waves. The other was a standard sledge. The third wasn't a key at all. It was a tiny round of metal, like a coin, with a slot and a raised rim, the kind you'd use to turn a ship's wheel hatch. I took them to archives the next day, pretending I'd found them loose. The woman from aisle 3 glanced at me like she knew everything and nothing. We get all sorts of things, she said, taking the bag. Doors everywhere. I quit that job 6 months later for reasons that had nothing to do with the building and also entirely did. People think the worst part was the face that didn't move. It wasn't. It was the card with my name in a place that never was. What do you do with evidence that you're already accounted for somewhere you haven't been? Sometimes, when a room is too quiet, my eyes jump to corners for seams. I've come to believe buildings are not solid. They are manners. They behave until they don't. I don't walk past stairwell B at exactly 30:14. I don't go down to count deposit boxes. And I never, ever put my hand on a ship's door unless the person on the other side can blink. Twist a year later, long after I left, a news piece runs about the building's renovations, hidden sub-basement discovered. The article quotes a contractor, old vault area, sealed off, weird door. Names on boxes. In the photo, there's a wired glass door. On it, a smeared handprint in frost. I've never told anyone this, and it won't make me sound sane. I think I killed someone. Or I didn't, or I helped the woods finish what he started. The truth is a handful of leaves and a choking. We weren't lost, not at first. The trail markers in the state forest were regular as a heartbeat, blue triangles nailed to trees every 100 yards. Easy enough for families with kids in little hiking boots. I'd made a stupid bet with my brother to do the loop in under 2 hours. He bailed that morning for the world's oldest reason, sick kid. I went anyway, because my brain gets loud when I don't keep promises to it. The forecast said clear. The temperature said mild. The car park had a few other vehicles. Nothing to warn us off, because there was nose. It was just me, one protein bar, and the clean need to move. 1 mile in, the quiet dialed up. Birds hush sometimes when hawks are near. This wasn't that. This was a dampening, like the forest wrapped cotton around itself. The air felt wetter than the weather. My phone had a bar. Good enough. I trotted past a moss-covered log and nearly stepped on a coin. Not a coin. A round metal disc nailed into the ground. It had numbers. Survey marker. I felt the weird pride of knowing something in the woods I wasn't supposed to. I tapped it with my toe and kept on. Halfway up the first hill I saw him. Shooter's stance, but with a camera, not a gun. He was late 20s, beard that said he cared. Backpack I recognized as expensive. He stood just off the trail, aiming at nothing I could see. I startled and apologized like I'd interrupted a private action. He glanced at me without seeing me, and then said, "Do you hear it?" I did hear it. A long thin note, almost a whistle, almost a voice. I said, "The wind." He shook his head. "No. The path." He gestured with his chin, a thing men do when their hands are busy holding something they think matters. Then he moved backward into the brush, slow and careful, still filming. I don't follow strangers into undergrowth. I'm not curious in that way. I kept walking, telling myself answers are the snack you earn for not detouring. The trail dipped into a shallow ravine. The damp rose and clung. The whistle note threaded through the trees like a seamstress pulling tight. A blue triangle marker nailed to a birch pointed right. I went right. The path narrowed to single file and then to single mind. I focused on where to put my feet. The forest floor changed under me, duffed to something spongy to something that felt like an old mattress. I stopped. The whistle got louder. Not wind, not a bird, not machinery. Something sustained, something practiced. It made my tongue root taste metallic. I turned around to shake off the creep. Behind me, no blue triangle, no trail, just trees leaning in like eavesdroppers. That's the moment my heart bit down. I had maybe 30 seconds of normal left. I chose wrong in those 30 seconds. I went forward because forward means finding marker means civilization. The trees crowded the light. The ground sloped down in a way that didn't show itself, and I found myself half jogging without deciding to move faster. He appeared again at my left, 2 steps away, and now a person again, not a camera. "Hey," he said, breathless, light in his eyes. "Don't step there." He pointed at the ground in front of my foot. It looked like ground, brown and humble. He bent and tapped the tip of his trekking pole. The earth gave like bread dough, then skinned over again. "Mats," he said. "Floating. Bad news if you go through." His voice was cheerful in a technical way, like hikers find joy in the word scree. He had a loop of cord around his wrist. He pulled it, and something tugged back, like a game with a dog off camera. "I've been following these," he said, nodding to his right. "The markers are wrong." He didn't mean the blue triangles. He meant something else. He pointed beyond my shoulder. I turned and saw a mark I'd never noticed in any forest. A slash high up on the trunk of a pine, clean and pale, like the tree had shrugged off its bark to show skin. The slash pointed not down the trail, but into the densest part of green. "Old boundary marks," he said, delighted. "They shaved them. See how it faces. The line turns there. You're bushwhacking off the trail," I said, keeping the judge out of my voice. He grinned. The trail moved. "The old road's there." He gestured again into the green. The word, "rod," makes the brain feel safe. I admit mine warmed to it. He saw my doubt and added, "I can show you." I should have said no. My body knew it before I did because the hair on my forearms lifted. He must have seen me shrink inward because he raised a hand friendly. "No pressure. Just don't step there," he said again, pointing at the bread off earth. He stepped past it, light as a person who knows the floor plan of the world. He didn't look like a threat. That's the trick with people, faces don't advertise the hands. We walked together at an oblique angle, away from what my brain insisted was path. 10 yards in, I noticed the zeros. He had objects clipped to his backpack with little carabiners. 3 of them were metal discs like the survey marker, notched, with numbers worn off. They clinked softly like spoons in a drawer. "You collect those?" I asked. He tapped one with his knuckle. "They collect me," he said, and laughed at his own joke. "I take photos," he added, to absolve himself of theft. "I think I document. This forest eats things. What do you mean eats? He stopped and pointed down. In a shallow trough half buried a curb. A perfect squared concrete edge, slick with moss. The kind of curb that belongs to streets. My mind performed a quick reorder of history: logging road, old homestead, yeah. He crouched and brushed moss with a practiced hand. Beneath, a painted line, faint and white. I felt the wrongness then, like a pressure change. The path you trust can be a river that moved. He led me to 2 trees with boundary slashes facing each other. Between them, space. Not a trail. It felt like standing in the aisle of a church after the pews have turned back into trees. He held up a palm, listening. The whistle note threaded in low and steady. Closer. He whispered, "Do you hear how it's behind and in front?" I did, and my stomach misinterpreted it as hunger. "It's the road," he said. "It breathes." We walked. Time did a slide. My phone put up its little SOS only. The light filtered in thick like something poured. We came to a depression, subtle, like a stream that forgot water. In the center lay more of the bread dough ground. He skirted it wide. I followed. Halfway around, his foot sank to the ankle. He yanked it out with a wet pop, laughed at himself too loud. The birds answered with silence again. We reached a clearing that wasn't a clearing, just a change in density. He lifted his camera again, found something his eye loved, and filmed. I watched the trees to the left and saw, for a moment, the true old road, the suggestion of parallel and distance in the trunks. I also saw a shape at the far edge, the kind of shape your brain labels as person before your eyes do the work. A woman. That's what my mind chose first because of the hair, long and caught on a branch. I said, "Hey," and lifted my hand. The hair moved in the wind in a way hair does. The rest didn't. We stood frozen like we'd been told to freeze. The shape wasn't a person. It was a coat, old and stiff, hung on a branch at shoulder height. The branch stuck through the sleeve like an arm bone. The wind calmed the hair lightly. Not hair. Lichen, long and pale. I felt stupid and suddenly very thirsty. He moved toward it. "Don't," I said, and the word came out too hard. He looked back at me with a smirk that said, "I was the kind of person who leaves the trail when there are markers telling me I can." "It's just a thing," he said. "The forest eats things, but it leaves bones." He reached the coat and gently pulled it free. It made a ripping sound wetter than fabric. Something fell from the pocket, another metal disc. He held it up. "See," he said. His palm was coated in black slimy spores. He frowned at his hand, wiped it on his pants unconcerned. We got turned around then. "I can trace that pivot now." He put the disc in his pocket. The whistle note swelled and shifted. It seemed to come from my right ear, and then behind my teeth. He said, "This way," with a confidence that felt like optimism, not knowledge. I followed because he had better shoes, and something about needing a witness to your own mistake is social. We walked 10 minutes or 30. The light didn't move like it should. Our track was soft. The bread dough spots proliferated until avoiding them meant we zigzagged like drunk bees. I said, cheerful to myself and then aloud, "We should go back." He shook his head. "Back is forward. You're not thinking two-dimensionally," he said, and laughed when he meant to be kind. The first time I thought he might be dangerous had nothing to do with him. We stopped at a clump of ferns to drink water. He unscrewed his bottle, took a long swallow, and choked. He made a face and swore. "Tastes like blood," he said, then gagged. He leaned over and spat. It looked like rust and saliva. "Iron in the water," he said, casual, except our water was bottled. He took another sip to prove something and swallowed with effort. I tilted my own bottle and let a little hit my tongue. It tasted fine. He looked at me, reading my expression, and something pinched behind his eyes, like being called a liar without the word. He didn't speak for several minutes. The silence took us apart from each other. When he finally said, "This way," his voice had a new layer, thinner. He brushed past a sapling and popped a leaf into his mouth without thinking, like foraging shows make people braver than their stomachs. 2 steps later he stopped and held his throat like he'd swallowed a bee. "Allergic," I said, moving toward him. He shook his head and bent double, gagging, trying to vomit up nothing. He made a strangled sound, and panic made my hands stupid. I slapped his back. He retched dry, eyes bulging. I thought plant sap irritant. I grabbed my water and sloshed his mouth. He coughed and looked at me like I'd done it, like I'd poured something wrong in. He fell to his knees, fingers digging at his tongue, as if to pluck out a hair. He scraped until blood threaded with spit down his wrist. "Sit," I said, ridiculous word, and pushed him gently against a tree. He gasped shallow, high, a child's pant in a grown chest. He grabbed the cord loop on his wrist, the one that had tugged earlier, and pulled once. It didn't tug back. He pulled again, frantic. I realized how deep he'd wound himself into this place, like a diver who tied a line to his own certainties and trusted it would lead him out. He stared at me like I was supposed to know what to do. I don't know why I did what I did next. I took the metal disc he'd put in his pocket. It was warm like it had been in a mouth. I held it out. He shook his head wildly, eyes panicked. A child refusing medicine. I pressed it into his palm anyway and closed his fingers over it. His breath hitched, then slowed fractionally, as if the act of clutching something that belonged to the forest steadied him. I sat with him while his breathing scrabbled at the right rhythm. He whispered something then. I leaned close and heard. It won't let me swallow. I said nothing, because any word would be a shape the forest could fill. I watched his chest. After a minute it rose a little easier. He moved his head side to side like rinsing thought. We need to go back, he said, voice ragged, humbled. I nodded so hard my neck hurt. Which way? I asked. We both looked up. The trees did not answer. He chose a direction. We went. The bread dough spots widened into dark puddles that weren't wet. When a leaf fell into one, it took 15 seconds to disappear like a slow magic trick. He skirted one too close. His boot sank to midsole. He yanked it free with that soft pop. A lace snapped. He pitched forward and grabbed my forearm hard enough to bruise. I grabbed him back. We stood linked, breathing like caught animals. He said, "'Kay," softly, childlike now. "Okay." We found a survey stake at last. Bright pink ribbon faded to old tongue. I have never loved trash more. The ribbon whispered in a breeze I couldn't feel anywhere else. We followed the direction it bowed. 20 yards, 40. Then, a sound I will hear in dreams, a car door slamming in the middle distance. I laughed, abrupt and loud. He laughed too, relief burbling out like a spill. We moved faster. He tripped and went to his knees, and a disc popped loose and rolled into one of the dark mats, and sank half in with a sleepy acceptance. He lunged with a cry that sounded too intimate, and I grabbed him by the collar hard enough to choke him. "Leave it," I said too loud. He looked at me with a hatred that looked exactly like grief. It lasted a second, then left. We hit the real trail like hitting pavement after gravel. The blue triangle sat on a tree smug. I wanted to kiss it. We walked out quiet and then faster, then half jogging because normal returned like good weather. At the parking lot, I wanted to hug him like you do after near-crash strangers. He took off his pack with deliberate movements. Like an old man. He said, "I'm going back tomorrow." Like a promise made to his own reflection. I said, "Don't," with humor to soften it. "Document something else. Birds." He smiled without his eyes and said, "It eats birds too." And we laughed like we had energy for jokes. He didn't come back the next day. I did not go back either. A week later I read a blurb: missing person. Hiker last seen at forest trailhead. The photo was him without the hat. Hair flattened. Eyes light so you could see the pupil edges. I called the number and told a deputy what little I could, where, when, the mats, the discs. He asked about the disc in his pocket. He had one, I said. He dropped one. The deputy said thanks in a voice that had used the word too many times. They found his backpack 3 weeks after. It had been hung carefully on a branch at shoulder height, zipped. Inside, camera, SD card damp but readable. A ranger told me that unofficially. "Never watch things like that," he said. I did anyway because I am not as wise as my own fear. The last clip is 5 minutes of green. It's steady. He's walking. He stops and focuses on a boundary slash. The audio is the whistle note, constant. He whispers, "Listen," like he was writing a bedtime story to the forest. Then the camera drops to his chest level, jerks once, and I hear a sound like gagging. He says, "It won't let me," and then the sound stops. Not fades, stops. The camera tilts and I see his hand, fingers spread, palm black with spores. He wipes it on his pants. He laughs a little, apologetic, like to himself, and says, "Okay." Then the video slices to static. Not glitch. Slice. Do I think I killed him? No. That's the sane answer. I think the forest ate him. But sometimes I wake in the flattened dark at 300 and taste iron. I think of the moment with the disc, and the way he looked at me like the coin was either a talisman or a weight. If I had taken him by the wrist and pulled him out then, marched him to the lot, would he be alive? Probably not. Or yes. That's the cruelty of wrong turns. You don't know which one matters until the map redraws itself around your absence. My brother asked last month if I wanted to do that loop with him. I told him no, told him why. He laughed and said, "You and your stories." Then, seeing me not laugh, he softened, said, "Okay." Another park. He sent me a link to a coastal trail. The first photo was a boardwalk over marsh. I closed my laptop. I drove to the beach anyway. I walked where the path was boards and nails and people and gulls. The wind there doesn't whistle. It shouts. I let it. Twist. Last week a metal disc arrived in my mailbox. No note. The number etched into it is clear this time. It's my house number. I froze on the porch as something moved behind the peephole. The voice inside my head said, "Don't knock." Then the doorknob turned from the other side, slow and careful, like a hand learning how to be a hand. Rewind. It was a rideshare run I shouldn't have accepted. Surge pricing will make you a little braver than you deserve. The request popped up from a generic business park near the airport. Destination a residential street in a suburb I knew by name only. The passenger's name was C. No profile photo. The pickup pin sat on a service road behind the warehouse co-op. I texted, "I'm here," and got back by the loading dock. It was 1:12 a.m., the hour when the world is both too empty and too full. She came out quick, hoodie up, bag clutched to chest. She slid into the back seat and kept her head down in that way that says, "I don't want to be looked at." Not that I shouldn't be. "Hey," I said. Default pleasant. "Hey," she said. Default small. The air in the car shifted the way it does when a person has been crying. I didn't ask. I tapped start, and the GPS drew a blue line through a grid I didn't know. The route ran us along the freeway for a bit, then off, then down side streets where the houses tucked in like sleeping animals. We drove in quiet. She kept glancing back, not at me, but at the world behind us. The kind of looking you do when you're sure something is following, and you want to catch it failing to hide. I checked the mirror once and caught her eyes. They were raw around the rim. She saw me see and looked at her hands. I thought about asking if she was okay. I didn't. There are questions that are permission slips for people to fall apart. I did not want to be the person holding the paper. 5 minutes from the pin, the GPS cut our road and sent us one street over, then one more, like threading a needle. "It's doing a weird reroute," I said, trying to be casual. She said nothing. The houses here were older. The streetlights were softer, amber instead of white, making the world a little sepia. The map showed a cul-de-sac, but when we reached it, there was no circle, just a short dead end ending at a chain-link fence. The pin hopped a block with a little digital stutter. "It says one more block," I said. "Sorry." We went around the corner. The street had a name that matched the one in the app, but the houses looked different. Not rundown. Stopped. The curtains in the front windows had the shape of older fabric. The paint colors were a decade behind. The lawns were clipped neatly but lacked toys, flags, the plastic optimism of suburbs. The map said we'd arrived. The pin stuck to a house 3 in from the corner. The porch light was on. The number matched what the app displayed. "This is it?" I asked. She leaned forward between the seats and squinted at the house. "Yes," she said, but the word didn't have confidence in it. "Do you want me to wait?" I asked, breaking my own rule. She nodded. "Please." She opened her door and stood, then stopped with the door between her and the night, as if on a threshold between two versions of the same person. She stepped out, shut it softly, and went up the walk. The porch light did that gentle hum old bulbs do. She'd raised her hand to knock, and then paused like she'd reached into a memory and didn't like what she touched. Then she knocked. I watched the door. The peephole darkened in my mind before it did in the door. I imagined the lens flexing like an eye. The door opened a fraction. Chain latch on. A face angled into the gap, older woman, hair gray, skin the kind that loses its attention to muscle slowly. "Yes," she said, cautious but not unfriendly. The girl said a name I didn't catch. The woman blinked and smiled the way people smile when asked if they are themselves. "No," she said. "Wrong house." The girl stumbled over an apology, a mixture of, "I'm sorry," and, "My GPS," like everyone does now when they are wrong. The woman softened her voice. "It happens," she said. "Are you okay?" The girl said yes too fast. The woman's eyes flicked past her to my car, watched a second longer than polite, then shut the door. The girl came back, got in, closed the door, fastened her belt like a ritual. "Wrong house," I said. She stared at her hands. "No," she said. "It's right. It's just not." She breathed once, deep, like going under. "Can you try the address again?" she asked. I typed the number. The map provided the same house, she said. "Maybe around back." That's when I did the thing. I said, "I can drive around the block." She shook her head, panic brightening her face. "No, it's this one." She opened the door again. "I'll just try again." She left the door open like a tether. She went back to the porch. I knocked again harder. The peephole darkened. The chain slid. The door opened wider. The woman's face came out farther into the light. I know you, she said, not like you know someone, like you recognize your own handwriting from years ago. The girl's shoulders dropped an inch. The woman undid the chain. I told myself then to look away, give privacy. I didn't. The woman kept the door across her body like a shield. Where have you been? She asked, voice softer. The girl made a noise that wasn't a word. The woman's eyes did a swift, precise flick to the street again, to me like something calculated. She said, "Come in," with an extra word under it, "come back." The girl stepped forward. The woman's hand touched her sleeve, a touch that felt like both test and claim. The girl crossed the threshold. 10 seconds passed. 20. I counted because counting is my hobby, when everything else becomes guesses. The porch light hummed. I adjusted my rear view and caught movement across the street, curtains shifting in another house, someone watching the late show of other people's decisions. 30 seconds. The GPS app still showed me as arrived. The fair hadn't ended. At the 60-second mark, the porch light flicked once and went off. Darkness took the doorway like a mouth closing. I waited 5. I waited 10. I texted, "End," into the app. No response. I leaned forward to look at the house numbers again, as if the right numbers would mean right universe. I didn't want to go to the door. People get shot for less than concern. I also didn't want to drive away. I put the car in park and left the engine running like a coward's compromise. I got out. On the porch, up close, the paint on the door was new. Not new today, but in the last year. The brass of the knob had skin oil patterns from hands that used it a lot. The peephole was one of those modern ones you install yourself from the hardware aisle. I stood with my knuckles not touching the wood, decision suspended. That's when I saw the peephole darken. Someone was there, eye to glass, and I saw it because the light changed, the tiniest hollow around the lens, shifting when a skull gets close. I froze. The knob turned slowly. My shoulder tightened, ready to become a person doing something unwise. The door opened a crack. The chain was on. The bezel of the peephole reflected a thin line of porch light. No voice came. I said, "Sorry, and before I could finish misguided, the chain slid off, very quiet, like a snake moving away from heat. The door opened wider. The woman stood there, except 3 things were wrong. Her hair was different, shorter by a few inches. Her shirt was not the one from a minute ago, but an older cut, tiny flowers in an out-of-time pattern. And behind her, the house was wrong. The entryway had a small table with a phone on it, the kind you can't carry, coiled cord draped just so. The air that came out was a decade. "Yes," she said, not recognizing me. "I brought her," I said, hearing my voice graft excuses to my face. "Your daughter." As I said it, the room behind her did an optical trick. My eyes rearranged it into now. The phone was a base station. The table was new. Her shirt was the same. My brain apologized to itself. The woman said, "She's here," like a satisfied answer, but then, under it, a question. "She is?" she added, looking past me at the car. "She came in," I said. The woman's eyes didn't move from my face. "No," she said quietly. "You're mistaken." She started to close the door. I stepped forward without thinking, hand lifted in that universal, "Wait." The woman's eyes flipped to my hand in a microsecond. She stopped the door with her hip and said, very soft, "Don't." I took my hand back. "Sorry," I said, "because we throw that word like sand on oil. She asked me to wait. I stopped because there was a sound from the house. Not a voice. A small, steady recording noise. The kind of ticking a furnace used to make. Except houses now don't tick." The woman glanced over her shoulder at the hallway leading deeper in. For a second, her face opened the way people's faces open when they are too tired to be strategic. There was fear there, not at me, not at a person, but at the house, as if it had been misbehaving. She said, "Thank you," and closed the door. It clicked. The deadbolt turned with authority. I stood there a moment like a child dismissed. I went back to the car. I typed, "Are you okay?" in the app message thread, knowing it would go nowhere. The app pinged. Trip completed. I hadn't touched end. The fare settled with a cheery green check. I drove home under a sky that had the wrong number of stars. I told myself 50 normal explanations. I told myself the woman recognized me as a late-night complication she didn't want. I told myself the girl found a bathroom, water, a couch. I told myself a lot of things that were floorboards over a crawl space. The next morning, sunlight made its promises. I Googled the address, because that's a modern compulsion. A local forum thread popped up, titled by someone with a username that included 3 numbers and a dog breed. The thread was about weird GPS sends. People complained that their apps often routed them down that street when they needed the next one over. It's like it's off by one. Someone wrote. Another person said their pizza got delivered to the same wrong house 3 times in 2 months. The original poster wrote, it's because the one house won't update. Someone else replied, you mean the house where the woman? The rest was behind a login. I made an account. I know. Curiosity kills its own hunger. The story is a story 2 decades ago. A teenage girl left a party and didn't come home. The last phone ping put her near those blocks. Before that kind of data meant anything. Her mother sat up nights and left the porch light on for 3 years. People started dropping casseroles and stopped dropping by. The woman kept the light on anyway. At some point, her electricity got cut. Neighbors covered her bill under the table. The porch light kept burning. Time turned whispers into a murmur. She should move. She should accept it. She should stop. A comment at the bottom from a month ago. I had a rideshare driver bring a girl to my door at 1 a.m. She said my name. She looked exactly like the picture on the old missing posters, only older. I told her she was wrong, because I was afraid. By the time I opened the door, she was gone. The username was a string of numbers. I stared until the words blurred. 3 nights later, my app pinned 1:12 a.m., surge pricing. I did not accept. I was already driving. I told myself I was going to a fast food place that was open late. I told myself I was just looking. The house had its porch light on. The rest of the street was darker. I parked out of the line of sight, which is something people do when they mean to be unseen. 5 minutes. A woman walked by with a dog. The dog slowed by the curb and lifted its head, sniffing toward the house like gossip. It whined once. The woman tugged the leash gently and murmured, "Come on." At 1:22, a car pulled up, a different rideshare. A driver, a man this time, watched the house without trying to not watch. He typed something on his phone. He waited. He checked the door. He got out at last, stood on the sidewalk, looked at his car like it might tell him what to do. He walked toward the porch. He reached the steps. He put a foot on the first one. He stopped. He went back to the car. He left. I sat with my hands on the wheel, white at the knuckles. I went home and slept with the light on like I was 7. 2 days later, my app refused to load that street on a map. When I typed the house number, the app pin slipped 1 block over and sat, stubborn. Last month, I drove a woman home from the late shift at a hospital. We passed near those blocks. She glanced out and said, "Don't go down there." I laugh like people laugh when they want to be on the correct side of a joke. GPS wouldn't, even if I tried? I said. She looked out the window and said nothing for a long enough time that silence turned into a third person in the car. Then she said, "My cousin goes there sometimes. She brings a rose and leaves it on the porch." I asked, because my mouth is not as wise as it should be, "Why a rose?" She said, "Because the woman can't open the door anymore. She lives with her son now. He turns the light on at dusk, like a timer. It goes off at 1. I drive different now. I accept different routes. When an app tells me to turn, I look, and if the road looks a degree off from the world, I say no. I am not brave in the way people think bravery looks like. I am brave in the way that keeps me 5 feet from certain porches. The twist. My phone did something small and mean last week. It added a new, frequent, location in my map's home work, and one labeled, arrived. When I tapped it, it pinged the coordinates of that house. The time attached 1:12:23 a.m. 3 weeks ago. The night I swore I never left my car. I didn't. But when I hold my hand up to the peephole in my mind, I can feel an eye blink on the other side.